At 2:14 a.m., Adrian Volkov discovers something impossible in his ledgers. A 3% discrepancy that could only mean one thing: betrayal from inside his fortress. But when he follows the trail, he doesn't find a traitor. He finds a young housekeeper named Lena Hart, desperately taking food she thinks no one will miss. What starts as simple theft unravels into something far more dangerous. A woman with secrets, a past soaked in blood, and a digital key that could topple empires. This is the story of two people who never should have met, bound together by suspicion, survival, and something neither of them saw coming. If you're ready to see how far this story goes, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to know where in the world you're watching from. Now let's begin. The numbers didn't lie. Adrian Volkov had built his empire on that single certainty. Numbers were clean, absolute. They didn't carry grudges, didn't smile while plotting against you, didn't look you in the eye and swear loyalty while sharpening knives behind their backs. Numbers just were. So when the discrepancy appeared at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, 3% missing from a shipment ledger that should have balanced perfectly, Adrian didn't dismiss it as a clerical error. He leaned back in his leather chair, eyes narrowing at the screen, and felt the familiar cold settle into his chest. 3%. In his world, 3% was the difference between respect and weakness. It was blood in the water. His penthouse office sat 40 floors above Manhattan, wrapped in floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city into a glittering sprawl of ambition and desperation. At this hour, the streets below were nearly empty, but Adrian knew better than to trust the quiet. Violence didn't keep business hours. He pulled up the security logs, cross-referenced the warehouse manifest, and traced the transaction chain backward through shell companies and intermediaries until he found the thread that didn't belong. Someone had been careful, professional, but not careful enough. The door to his office was closed, as it always was after midnight. The cleaning staff had finished hours ago, or they should have. Adrian's schedule was a well-oiled machine, every gear turning precisely when it should. He employed people who understood that deviation meant dismissal, and in his line of work, dismissal sometimes meant more than just losing a paycheck. He was about to call his head of security when he heard it, a sound. Faint. Coming from the kitchen area adjacent to his private quarters. Adrian didn't move. He listened. There it was again, the soft scrape of a cabinet door, the whisper of movement trying too hard to be silent. He rose from his desk without a sound. Years of surviving in a world where hesitation meant death had trained him to move like a shadow when necessary. His hand went to the drawer where he kept a Glock 19, checked the magazine out of habit, and crossed the darkened office toward the source of the noise. The kitchen was supposed to be empty. He paused at the doorway, pressed against the wall, and peered around the frame. A figure stood at the counter, silhouetted by the dim light filtering through the window. Small, female, moving quickly but carefully, wrapping something in cloth and tucking it into a worn canvas bag. Adrian stepped into the doorway and flipped the light switch. "Don't move!" The woman froze. Her back was to him, shoulders rigid, one hand still clutching the edge of the bag. She didn't turn around. "Hands where I can see them," Adrian said quietly. He didn't raise the gun yet, didn't need to. His voice carried enough weight on its own. Slowly she lifted her hands. They were small, thin-fingered, trembling just slightly. "Turn around." She did. Adrian recognized her immediately. Lena Hart, one of the housekeepers. She'd been working in the building for maybe 3 months, always quiet, always efficient. He'd barely noticed her beyond a passing glance, just another face in the machinery that kept his life running smoothly. Now he saw her clearly. Mid-20s, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, brown eyes wide but not quite panicked. She wore the standard black uniform of the cleaning staff, but it hung loose on her frame, like she'd lost weight recently. There were shadows under her eyes, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights. "Mr. Volkov." Her voice was steady, which surprised him. Most people stammered when he caught them off guard. "I can explain. I'm sure you can." Adrian's gaze dropped to the bag on the counter. "What's in the bag, Miss Hart?" She hesitated, just for a heartbeat. "Food," she said finally. "Leftovers from the refrigerator. Things that would have been thrown out anyway." "So you decided to help yourself?" "Yes." No excuses, no tears, just a simple admission. Adrian studied her. In his experience, people caught stealing usually followed one of two scripts. They either collapsed into desperate pleas for mercy, or they turned combative manufacturing justifications for why they deserved what they'd taken. Lena Hart did neither. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "Yes." "And you thought stealing from me was a good idea?" "I didn't think I'd get caught." Adrian almost smiled. "Almost. That's honest." "I'm good at my job," Lena said. "I know your schedule. You're never in the kitchen at this hour. You're always in your office until 3 a.m., then you sleep for exactly 4 hours. This should have been safe." Now Adrian did smile, and it wasn't pleasant. "You've been watching me. I've been cleaning your home for 3 months. You notice patterns. Or you're gathering intelligence." The accusation hung in the air. Lena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Not fear, something sharper. "If I were gathering intelligence," she said carefully, "I wouldn't risk exposure by stealing food. Unless the food is a cover. Unless you're here for something else, and this," he gestured at the bag, "is your excuse if you get caught. That's a lot of paranoia for some leftover chicken." "In my world, paranoia keeps you breathing." They stared at each other across the kitchen. Adrian was used to people wilting under his attention, but Lena held his gaze. Not defiant, exactly. Just present. Like she'd already calculated the risks and decided that meeting his eyes was less dangerous than looking away. "Empty the bag," Adrian said. Lena reached for it slowly, opened the top, and began pulling items out one by one. A container of pasta, half a roasted chicken, some bread, fruit, cheese. Nothing exotic, nothing that suggested espionage. "That's everything?" Adrian asked. "That's everything." "Why?" "Why what?" "Why risk your job, risk worse, for food you could buy at any grocery store?" For the first time, Lena looked away. Her jaw tightened. "Because grocery stores require money, and I don't have enough of it right now." "You're employed. You get paid." "Not enough." Adrian crossed his arms, gun still in hand but lowered. "You're going to need to do better than that." Lena took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice had lost some of its steadiness. "My neighbor is 83 years old. She has no family. Her pension doesn't cover rent and food both. I've been helping her. The food I take here, it goes to her." "You're stealing from me to feed your neighbor?" "Yes." Adrian watched her face for tells, the micro-expressions that revealed lies. He'd spent years learning to read people, to spot deception before it could hurt him. But Lena's face showed nothing except exhaustion and a stubborn sort of dignity that didn't fit someone caught red-handed. "Where do you live?" he asked. "The Bronx." "Rent?" $1,500 for a one-bedroom. I split it with my neighbor to help her out." "And your salary here?" Lena pressed her lips together. $2,000 a month. Adrian did the math instantly. $1,500 for rent, utilities, transportation, food for 2 people. The numbers didn't work. She was drowning slowly, trying to keep someone else's head above water. Why not let her starve? The question was brutal, but Adrian had never seen the point in softening hard truths. Why risk everything for someone else's survival? "Because someone has to give a damn," Lena said quietly, "and no one else does." Something in her tone made Adrian pause. It wasn't self-righteousness. It was resignation, the sound of someone who'd already lost too much to care about losing more. He should fire her, should have security escort her out, and blacklist her from every building in the network. Theft was theft, and mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford. But the discrepancy in his ledgers gnawed at him. 3%. And here was someone who noticed patterns, who watched schedules, who moved through his space invisible and unnoticed. "Tell me something," Adrian said. "In the 3 months you've worked here, what have you observed about this place?" Lena blinked. "I don't understand." "You said you notice patterns, so tell me, what have you seen?" She hesitated, clearly confused by the turn in conversation. But she answered, "You have meetings every Tuesday and Thursday at 11 p.m. Different men each time, but they follow the same routine. Elevator straight to your office, no stops. They leave within 90 minutes. No one else is allowed on this floor during those meetings." "Go on." "You receive deliveries at irregular intervals, always after business hours. The security team changes shift rotation before each delivery. And you personally inspect every shipment manifest, even for things you should trust your people to handle." Adrian's expression didn't change, but internally, he revised his assessment. She wasn't just observant, she was analytical. Why would I do that, he asked. Inspect personally when I have staff? Because you don't trust anyone completely, Lena said. Not even the people closest to you. And why would that be? Because someone close to you has already betrayed you, or you think they're about to. Adrian felt the cold settle deeper. She'd read the situation from fragments, from the small behavioral tells he thought were invisible. Either she was exceptionally perceptive, or she'd been trained to look for exactly these things. Who do you work for? He asked softly. Myself, and Clark Building Services. Before that. Before that, I worked at a restaurant. Before that, a hotel. Before that, I was in school. What did you study? Accounting. The word hit Adrian like a carefully aimed punch. An accountant, working as a housekeeper, noticing patterns in his security, his meetings, his deliveries. Why aren't you working as an accountant? He asked. Lena's face closed down. Because no one hires people with gaps in their resume and no references. What caused the gap? Family issues? Specifically. My father died. I had to handle his affairs. It took longer than expected. Adrian waited. People always filled silence when they were nervous. Lena held his gaze and said nothing more. Interesting. He gestured toward the bag of food. Put it back in the bag. Take it with you. Confusion flickered across her face. What? You heard me. Take the food. Go feed your neighbor. I don't understand. You're not calling security? Not yet. Adrian moved to the counter, set the gun down, still within reach, and opened a drawer. He pulled out a business card and a pen, wrote something on the back, and held it out to her. Lena took it hesitantly. The front had his name and a phone number. The back had an address in the Bronx. Tomorrow night, Adrian said. 10 p.m. Be at that address. Why? Because we're going to have a longer conversation about what you've noticed, and about why someone with an accounting degree is stealing food instead of using her skills for something more profitable. I told you, Ante, you told me a story about a neighbor. Maybe it's true. Maybe it's cover. Either way, I want to know more. Adrian picked up the gun again, checked the safety, and tucked it into the back of his waistband. Consider tomorrow night an interview. For what position? To be determined. He walked past her toward the door, then paused and looked back. Miss Hart, if you run, I will find you. If you talk to anyone about this conversation, I will know. And if you're lying to me about who you really are, well, let's just say I don't respond well to deception. Lena's throat worked as she swallowed. Understood. Good. 10 p.m. Don't be late. Adrian left the kitchen and returned to his office. He didn't watch her leave, didn't need to. If she was smart, she'd show up tomorrow. If she was working for someone, they'd make a mistake trying to prepare her. Either way, he'd get answers. He sat back down at his desk and pulled up the security footage from the past 3 months, filtered for Lena Hart's shifts. He watched her move through the penthouse, efficient and unremarkable, never lingering, never deviating from her tasks. Except, there, 3 weeks ago. She'd paused at his office door, not entering, just standing in the hallway, staring at the closed entrance for nearly 30 seconds before moving on. And there, 5 weeks ago. She'd spent an extra 2 minutes in the study, but the cameras didn't show what she'd been doing, just that she'd been still, facing the bookshelves. Adrian leaned forward, studying the footage frame by frame. Either he'd just caught the most brazen spy in New York, or he'd stumbled onto something else entirely. Someone with skills she shouldn't have, drowning in circumstances that didn't add up, desperate enough to steal but disciplined enough to do it well. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, his head of security. Found the source of the discrepancy. Internal. One of the warehouse supervisors. Want me to handle it? Adrian typed back quickly. Not yet. Bring me everything on him. Family, finances, associations. I want to know who he's working with. Understood. Adrian set the phone down and stared out at the city. Somewhere out there, Lena Hart was probably panicking, trying to figure out what she'd walked into. Or she was making a phone call to whoever had sent her, reporting that she'd been compromised. Time would tell which. He returned to the ledgers, but his mind kept drifting back to the kitchen. To the way she'd stood there, hands steady despite being caught, answering his questions without collapsing into hysteria. People didn't survive in his world by being soft. They survived by being smart, ruthless, and willing to do what others wouldn't. Lena Hart had stolen from him, but she'd done it carefully, strategically, with just enough boldness to succeed and just enough restraint to avoid detection, until tonight. Adrian smiled without warmth. Tomorrow night would be very revealing. Up. The Bronx smelled like rain and old garbage. Adrian stood across the street from the address he'd given Lena, watching the building through the window of a black SUV. Marcus sat in the driver's seat, silent and alert. "This is the place?" Marcus asked. According to her employment file, the building was 4 stories of worn brick and peeling paint, the kind of place where broken windows got taped up instead of replaced. A bodega on the corner had bars over its windows. 2 men stood on the stoop next door, smoking and watching the street with the casual awareness of people who knew how to spot trouble. Adrian had grown up in places like this, back before he'd clawed his way into wealth and power. He recognized the ecosystem, the unspoken rules, the way people moved, the silent calculations behind every interaction. "You sure about this?" Marcus asked. "Could be a setup. If it's a setup, she's dead and we move on. And if it's not?" Adrian didn't answer. He checked his watch, 9:47 p.m. 13 minutes later, Lena appeared at the end of the block. She walked quickly, head down, hands shoved into the pockets of a thin jacket that didn't look warm enough for October. She glanced over her shoulder twice before reaching the building's entrance. Adrian waited. She emerged 2 minutes later carrying a bag, not the one from last night, something smaller, and headed back the way she'd come. "Follow her," Adrian said. Marcus started the engine and pulled into traffic, keeping 2 cars between them and Lena. She walked 4 blocks, turned down a side street, and entered another building even more decrepit than the first. Adrian stepped out of the SUV before Marcus could object. "Sir, stay with the car. If I'm not out in 15 minutes, call the team." "This is stupid." Noted. Adrian crossed the street and entered the building. The lobby smelled like mildew and old cooking oil. The elevator had an out-of-order sign taped to it, so he took the stairs. Lena's voice filtered down from above, tense, urgent. "I told you, I don't have it yet. I need more time." A man's voice, rough and impatient. "You've had 3 months. Vargas is done waiting." 2 weeks. I just need 2 more weeks." "You don't get 2 weeks. You get until Friday." "That's 4 days. Then you better work fast." Adrian reached the landing and peered around the corner. Lena stood in the hallway outside an apartment door, facing 2 men. They were both bigger than her, both wearing the kind of cheap leather jackets that marked them as foot soldiers for someone higher up the chain. One of them grabbed Lena's arm. "You think Vargas cares about your excuses? You borrowed money. You pay it back. Simple." "I'm paying it back. I've already given you 8,000, and you still owe 12, plus interest." "The interest wasn't part of the deal." The man shoved her against the wall. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to make a point. "The deal is whatever Vargas says it is. You don't like it. Take it up with him." "Oh, wait, you can't, because he doesn't waste time on broke little thieves." Adrian stepped into the hallway. "Gentlemen?" Both men turned. The one holding Lena released her and shifted his stance, hand moving toward his waistband. "Who the hell are you?" the second man demanded. "Someone who doesn't appreciate interruptions." Adrian walked toward them slowly, hands visible, posture relaxed. He'd learned long ago that showing aggression too early was amateur hour. Real danger moved calmly. The first man pulled a knife. "Turn around and walk away, old man. This doesn't concern you." Adrian stopped 3 feet away. "I'm 37, hardly old, and it does concern me because the woman you're threatening works for me." Lena's eyes went wide. "Mr. Volkov, you shouldn't—" "How much does she owe?" Adrian asked, ignoring her. The men exchanged glances. The second one grinned, showing missing teeth. 12,000, plus 2 in interest. Call it 15 and we're square." $15,000. Adrian pulled out his phone, opened a banking app, and started typing. "I'll need an account number." "You're serious?" "I don't joke about money." The first man rattled off a number. Adrian transferred $15,000 and showed them the confirmation screen. "Done," he said. "Her debt is paid. You're finished here." The men stared at the phone, then at each other. "Just like that?" the second one asked suspiciously. "Just like that. Unless you'd rather explain to Vargas why you turned down clean money." The first man pocketed his knife. Yeah, okay, we're done. He jabbed a finger at Lena. You're lucky, sweetheart. Real lucky. They walked past Adrian toward the stairs. He waited until their footsteps faded before turning to Lena. She stood against the wall, face pale, looking like she might either cry or punch him. What the hell did you just do? She whispered. Solved a problem. You had no right. I had every right. You're in my employ. That makes you my responsibility. I don't need saving. Clearly. Adrian gestured toward the stairwell where the men had disappeared. You had that completely under control. Lena's hands balled into fists. You don't understand. That money, I was handling it. I had a plan. Your plan involved getting shoved against walls by loan sharks? My plan involved staying alive long enough to pay them back without... She stopped, jaw clenched. Without what? Lena looked away. Without anyone getting involved. Adrian studied her, the tension in her shoulders, the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. Who was the loan for? My father. I thought he was dead. He is. The loan was for his medical bills before he died. How much did you borrow originally? 20,000. And you've paid back 8. Yes. Adrian did the math. 20,000 at whatever predatory interest rate Vargas was charging, 8,000 repaid over 3 months. She'd been bleeding money trying to keep her head above water, stealing food because every dollar went toward the debt. Where's your father's estate? He asked. Lena laughed bitterly. Estate, right. He had nothing, less than nothing, just debts and... She stopped again. And what? Nothing. It doesn't matter now. Adrian stepped closer. Miss Hart, I just paid $15,000 to clear your debt. I think I've earned some honesty. Lena finally looked at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. He left me something. A storage unit. I haven't had time to go through it yet. It's probably just junk. Or it's something worth money. If it were worth money, he would have sold it before he died. Maybe. Or maybe he was protecting it. Lena shook her head. My father wasn't protecting anything. He was just lost. After my mother died, he couldn't hold anything together. Lost his job, lost the house, lost everything. By the time he got sick, there was nothing left to lose. Adrian heard the exhaustion in her voice, the weight of carrying someone else's collapse. He knew that weight. Had carried it himself once, a long time ago. Come on, he said. I'll drive you home. I can take the subway. Miss Hart, I just cleared a debt with people who don't forget faces. Until I'm sure they've actually backed off, you don't go anywhere alone. I've been handling them for months, and now you don't have to. Adrian turned toward the stairs. Are you coming, or do I need to make it in order? Lena grabbed her bag and followed, muttering something under her breath that sounded like profanity. Good. Anger was better than despair. Marcus drove them back to Lena's building in silence. Adrian watched the streets roll past, watched Lena sit rigid in the back seat, watched her carefully avoid looking at him. When they pulled up to her building, she reached for the door handle. Tomorrow, Adrian said. 9 a.m. Be at my office. Lena turned. Why? Because we're not done talking, and because you now owe me $15,000. Her face went white. What? Did you think that was a gift? You said you were solving a problem. I was, by transferring the debt from them to me, but I'm a much more reasonable creditor. Adrian leaned forward slightly. You're going to work off what you owe, and I'm going to figure out what to do with someone who has your particular skills. I'm a housekeeper. You're an accountant who notices things. There's a difference. Lena stared at him, caught between fury and fear. And if I refuse, then I'll assume you were lying about everything, and I'll treat you accordingly. The threat hung unspoken but clear. Lena's jaw worked. Finally, she nodded once. 9 a.m. Don't be late. She got out of the car and disappeared into the building without looking back. Marcus pulled away from the curb and caught Adrian's eye in the rearview mirror. You're taking a hell of a risk with her. Maybe. She could be running to whoever sent her right now. If someone sent her, they're playing a very long game. Adrian watched the city scroll past. But I don't think anyone sent her. I think she's exactly what she appears to be. Someone drowning who learned to steal because the alternative was worse. And you're rescuing her out of the goodness of your heart? Adrian smiled coldly. I don't have a heart, Marcus, you know that. But I do have a 3% discrepancy in my books and a warehouse supervisor who's been skimming for 6 months. I need someone who can untangle financial threads without asking questions. Someone desperate enough to be loyal and smart enough to be useful. And if she's not, then I'll have wasted $15,000 and learned a valuable lesson about sentimentality. Marcus grunted. You don't do sentimentality. Exactly, which is why this will be interesting. They drove back to Manhattan in silence. Adrian's phone buzzed with updates from his team. Routine reports, nothing urgent. But he kept thinking about Lena's face when those men had cornered her. Not panicked, not begging, just tired. He recognized that exhaustion. Had felt it himself, years ago, when he'd been clawing his way out of hell with nothing but rage and ruthlessness to keep him moving. The difference was, he'd never let anyone help him, had never trusted anyone enough to accept a hand up, because hands that lifted you could also shove you down. Lena Hart had looked at him tonight like she couldn't decide whether he was salvation or another kind of trap. Smart woman. Tomorrow would tell him which instinct was correct. Lena didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor of her apartment, back against the wall, staring at the peeling paint on the ceiling and trying to figure out how her life had veered so completely off course in the span of 48 hours. 2 days ago, her biggest problem had been stretching her paycheck far enough to cover rent and keep Mrs. Chen fed. Now she owed $15,000 to a man who could probably make her disappear without anyone asking questions. The smart thing would be to run. Pack what little she had, catch a bus to somewhere far away, start over with a new name and a new story. She'd done it before, after her father died and the vultures started circling. Reinvention wasn't hard when you had nothing left to lose, except she did have something to lose now. Mrs. Chen. The old woman who'd taken Lena in when she'd shown up at this building 6 months ago with 2 suitcases and desperation written all over her face, who'd offered to split the rent, who'd shared meals and stories and never once asked questions Lena couldn't answer. Running meant abandoning her, and Lena had already abandoned too many people. At 6:30 a.m., she gave up on sleep, showered in water that never quite got hot, and put on the only professional clothes she owned, black slacks and a white blouse she'd bought at a thrift store for a job interview that had never materialized. She stared at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. When had she gotten so thin? When had those shadows under her eyes become permanent? She left the apartment at 8, caught the subway to Manhattan, and arrived at Adrian Volkov's building with 20 minutes to spare. The lobby was different in daylight. Polished marble, expensive art on the walls, security guards who looked like they moonlighted as linebackers. Lena approached the front desk, and the guard there, a massive man with a shaved head and a scar along his jawline, looked her up and down with the kind of assessment that came from military training. Name, he said. Not a question. Lena Hart. I have an appointment with Mr. Volkov. The guard checked his computer, frowned, then picked up a phone. There's a Lena Hart here for Mr. Volkov. He paused, listening. Understood. He hung up and gestured toward the elevators. 40th floor, someone will meet you. The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. Lena watched the numbers climb and tried to slow her racing heart. She'd faced down loan sharks, dealt with her father's creditors, survived months of barely eating so Mrs. Chen wouldn't starve. She could handle one conversation with a man who'd bought her debt. The elevator doors opened and Marcus stood waiting. He looked exactly like what he was, a professional killer in an expensive suit. Miss Hart, he said without inflection. Follow me. He led her down a hallway lined with abstract paintings that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime, stopped at a heavy wooden door, and knocked twice before opening it. Adrian's office was all glass and steel and expensive minimalism. He sat behind a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black wood, typing something on a laptop. He didn't look up when she entered. Marcus closed the door behind her and took up position beside it. Silent, watchful. Lena stood in the middle of the room and waited. After 30 seconds that felt like an hour, Adrian closed the laptop and looked at her. His eyes were the color of slate, cold and measuring. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Lena sat. She kept her spine straight, her hands folded in her lap, and met his gaze without flinching. She'd learned a long time ago that showing fear just made predators hungrier. "Do you know what I do, Miss Hart?" Adrian asked. "You run a shipping company, import-export." "That's the simplified version. The truth is more complicated." "I imagine most truths are." Adrian smiled slightly. "I control distribution networks across the eastern seaboard, legitimate and otherwise. I employ over 300 people directly and several thousand indirectly through shell companies and partnerships. My operation generates approximately $200 million annually." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm telling you this so you understand the stakes. In my world, trust is currency, and betrayal is expensive. I haven't betrayed you. Not yet. But you're an accountant who's been working as a housekeeper in my home for 3 months. That raises questions." "I told you why. You told me a story about your father's debts and a gap in your employment. But you didn't tell me what you were doing before the gap. You didn't tell me where you went to school. You didn't tell me why someone with your education ended up scrubbing floors." Lena's throat tightened. "Does it matter?" "Everything matters." Adrian opened a folder on his desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Lena Marie Hart, born in Philadelphia. Mother died when you were 12. Father was Richard Hart, worked as a database administrator for a pharmaceutical company until he was fired 6 years ago. You attended Temple University on scholarship, graduated with honors in accounting. Worked for Morrison and Associates, a mid-tier accounting firm, for 18 months. Then you vanished from public record for 2 years. No employment, no tax returns, no credit activity. You reappeared 8 months ago in the Bronx under your real name, took a job with Clark Building Services, and started cleaning offices." He set the paper down and looked at her. "Want to fill in the missing pieces?" Lena felt her carefully constructed walls start to crack. "How did you get all that?" "I have resources. Answer the question." She could lie. Spin some story about family crisis and personal issues and hope he'd accept it. But Adrian Volkov didn't strike her as someone who accepted comfortable lies. "My father got sick," she said quietly. "Cancer. Stage 4. The insurance company denied most of his treatment claims, said his condition was pre-existing. He had maybe a year left. I quit my job to take care of him." "And the 2 years?" "He lived longer than expected. 18 months. After he died, I had to settle his debts. That took another 6 months. By the time I was ready to work again, no one wanted to hire someone with a 2-year gap and no references. So you became a housekeeper." "I became whatever I could. Restaurants, hotels, office buildings, jobs that didn't ask questions." Adrian studied her in silence. Lena forced herself to hold his gaze, to not look away, to not show how much it cost her to drag these pieces of her life into the light. "Your father left you something," Adrian said. "A storage unit." "What's in it?" "I don't know. I haven't had time to check. Make time. Today." "Why?" "Because I'm curious. And because if there's something valuable in there, it might explain why loan sharks were willing to float $20,000 to someone with no collateral." Lena blinked. She hadn't thought of that. Vargas didn't lend money out of kindness. He lent it because he expected to get paid back, with interest, which meant he thought she had access to something worth more than $20,000. "What if there's nothing?" she asked. "Then we move on. But I want to see for myself." Adrian stood. "Marcus will drive you. I'll meet you there in an hour. Where's the facility?" "Queens, near the airport." Text the address to Marcus. Adrian walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. "Miss Hart, I'm going to be direct with you. I paid off your debt because I think you might be useful to me. But usefulness requires trust, and trust requires transparency. If you lie to me, if you hide things from me, this arrangement ends badly. Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. Go with Marcus. I'll see you in an hour." Lena stood on shaking legs and followed Marcus out of the office. She didn't look back at Adrian, didn't trust herself to keep her expression neutral if she did. In the elevator, Marcus handed her a phone. "Numbers already programmed. Text me the address." Lena typed it in with numb fingers and handed the phone back. "You scared?" Marcus asked. "Should I be?" "Depends on what's in that storage unit." "What if it's nothing, just old furniture and photo albums?" Marcus glanced at her. "Then you better hope Adrian's in a forgiving mood." They rode the rest of the way in silence. The storage facility was a squat concrete building surrounded by chain link fence. The kind of place where people stashed things they couldn't bear to throw away but didn't want to look at. Lena had only been here once, right after her father died, just long enough to pay the first month's fee and lock the door behind her. She stood in the parking lot now, staring at the building, and felt the weight of everything she'd been avoiding settle back onto her shoulders. Marcus parked the SUV and checked his phone. Boss says he's 10 minutes out. We wait. I could go in and... We wait. Lena leaned against the vehicle and tried to remember what her father had said in those last days, when the morphine made him lucid for brief windows of clarity. He'd talked about her mother, about mistakes he'd made, about things he should have done differently. But he'd also said something else, something that hadn't made sense at the time. I left you the good stuff, Lena. The only good thing I ever made. It's all yours now. Don't let them take it. She'd assumed he was talking about memories, photographs, sentimental junk. Now she wasn't so sure. A black sedan pulled into the lot, and Adrian stepped out. He'd changed from the suit he'd worn earlier into dark jeans and a leather jacket that made him look less like a CEO and more like what he actually was, someone dangerous. Show me, he said without preamble. Lena dug the key out of her pocket and led them inside. The facility smelled like dust and old cardboard. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. She found Unit 237, unlocked the door, and rolled it up. The space was maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, packed floor to ceiling with boxes and furniture covered in dusty sheets. Adrian stepped inside and pulled the sheet off the nearest item, a desk, scarred and old but solid wood. He opened the drawers methodically, checking each one. Empty. Start with the boxes, he said. Lena grabbed the nearest one and opened it. Books. Academic text on database architecture and software engineering. She set it aside and opened another. More books. Marcus pulled down a box from the top shelf. Got something here. He set it on the floor and opened it. Inside were old computers, not laptops, but desktop towers from at least a decade ago, the kind with more processing power than style. Adrian crouched beside the box and examined one of the towers. Your father worked with databases. Yes, for a pharmaceutical company, until they fired him. Why did they fire him? He wouldn't say, just that there was a disagreement about ethics. Adrian looked up sharply. Ethics. That's what he said. Marcus pulled down another box. This one was heavier. He cut through the packing tape and opened it, then went very still. Boss. Adrian stood and looked into the box. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. What is it? Lena asked. Adrian reached in and pulled out an external hard drive, the kind built to withstand damage. It was labeled with a date, 6 years ago, and a single word, archive. He pulled out another, then another. The box was full of them. At least 20 drives, each carefully labeled with dates spanning 5 years. Your father archived data, Adrian said slowly. A lot of data. I don't understand. What kind of data? Adrian set the drives on the desk and turned to face her. Miss Hart, what pharmaceutical company did your father work for? Sterling Biotech. Why? Because Sterling Biotech was investigated 4 years ago for falsifying clinical trial data. The investigation collapsed when their database administrator mysteriously died in a car accident and all the evidence disappeared. Lena's stomach dropped. My father wasn't involved in that. Are you sure? He was fired before any investigation started. Or he was fired because he found something he wasn't supposed to find. And instead of destroying it, he archived it. Adrian picked up one of the drives. If these contain what I think they do, your father wasn't protecting junk. He was protecting evidence. Evidence of what? Corporate fraud, medical malpractice, possibly manslaughter, depending on how many people died from falsified drug trials. Adrian looked at the drives, then at Lena. This is worth a fortune. To the right people. Or to the wrong ones. Marcus swore quietly. That's why Vargas lent her money. Someone told him what her father had. But I didn't know, Lena said, her voice rising. I had no idea any of this was here. Doesn't matter. If Vargas knows, others know. Which means you're in danger. Adrian pulled out his phone and made a call. I need a team at the Queen's storage facility. Now. Full security sweep and extraction. He hung up and looked at Marcus. Get her out of here. Back to the penthouse. What about the drives? Marcus asked. I'll handle them. Move. Lena didn't budge. Wait, you can't just take all this. It's mine. Which is why I'm protecting it. If someone comes looking for these drives, they're not going to politely ask for them. They're going to tear this place apart and anyone who gets in their way. Then I should be the one to decide what happens to them. Adrian stepped closer. Miss Hart, let me explain something very clearly. The data on these drives is worth millions, not because of what it proves, but because of what people will pay to make sure it never sees daylight. Pharmaceutical companies, executives, investors, they've all got billions riding on keeping this buried. Your father knew that. That's why he hid it. That's why he died keeping it secret. He died of cancer. Did he? Or did someone decide he was a liability and help him along? Adrian's voice was quiet but sharp. You said the insurance company denied his claims. What if that wasn't bureaucracy? What if it was deliberate? What if someone made sure he couldn't afford treatment, hoping he'd die before he could expose what he knew? Lena felt the ground tilt under her feet. She'd never questioned the insurance denials, had just assumed it was corporate cruelty, the casual evil of a system that valued profit over lives. But what if it had been targeted? I need to sit down, she whispered. Marcus pulled over a dusty chair. Lena sank into it, head spinning. Adrian crouched in front of her. I know this is a lot, but right now we don't have time to process. We need to move these drives somewhere secure before anyone else comes looking. And then what? Then we figure out what's on them, and we decide what to do with the information. We? You own the data, but I have the resources to protect it, and you. That makes this a partnership. Lena looked up at him. Why would you help me? What do you get out of this? Adrian smiled without warmth. Let's just say I have a long memory and a short list of people I respect. Your father was willing to lose everything to do the right thing. That's rare. I'd like to see his work mean something. It was a lie. Or at least not the whole truth. Lena could see it in his eyes. There was something else driving him, something personal. But she was too overwhelmed to dig deeper. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, take the drives. Keep them safe. Adrian stood. Smart choice. The sound of vehicles pulling into the lot echoed through the facility. Marcus moved to the door, hand inside his jacket. It's ours, Adrian said. Stand down. 4 men entered the unit, all dressed in black, all moving with the kind of precision that came from military training. Adrian pointed to the boxes of drives. Pack everything, carefully. Transport to the vault. No one touches the data until I give the word. The men moved efficiently, wrapping each drive in foam and loading them into reinforced cases. Within 10 minutes, the entire archive was packed and ready to move. Adrian turned to Lena. Go with Marcus. I'll meet you back at the penthouse. What are you going to do? Make sure we weren't followed, and make a few calls to people who owe me favors. Lena wanted to argue, to demand more answers, to take control of a situation that had spiraled so far beyond her understanding, but she was exhausted and terrified and out of her depth. So she followed Marcus to the SUV and didn't look back as they pulled away from the facility. They were 10 minutes into the drive when Marcus's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his jaw tightened. Understood, adjusting route. He hung up and made a sharp turn down a side street. What's wrong? Lena asked. Someone's tailing us. Black sedan, 2 cars back. Been following since we left the facility. Lena twisted to look out the rear window. Are you sure? I'm sure. Marcus accelerated, weaving through traffic with the kind of skill that came from practice. Boss is sending backup. We just need to keep moving until they intercept. Who's following us? Don't know yet. Could be Vargas's people. Could be someone else who heard about the drives. The sedan behind them sped up, closing the distance. Marcus cursed and made another turn, this time onto a wider avenue with more traffic. Hold on! He gunned the engine, cutting across 2 lanes and narrowly missing a delivery truck. Horns blared. The sedan followed, relentless. Lena's heart hammered. Can we lose them? Working on it. Marcus made 3 more turns in rapid succession, doubling back and using the heavy traffic as cover. But the sedan stayed with them, matching every move. They're professional, Marcus muttered. This isn't street-level muscle. He pulled out his phone and made a call while steering one-handed. We've got a problem. They're not backing off. Where's the backup? Whatever the answer was, it made Marcus swear again. 5 minutes. We need 5 minutes. He shoved the phone into a holder and focused on driving. The sedan pulled alongside them. Lena caught a glimpse of the driver. Middle-aged, clean-cut, expression calm. Not the face of a thug, the face of someone doing a job. The passenger window rolled down. "Get down!" Marcus yelled. Lena threw herself sideways as the passenger in the sedan raised a gun. The first shot shattered the rear window. Marcus swerved hard, clipping a parked car and sending them into a skid. He corrected, accelerated, and made a sharp right turn into an underground parking garage. The tires screamed. The sedan followed. Marcus drove down 3 levels, tires squealing on the concrete, and then killed the engine behind a support column. "Out! Now!" Lena scrambled out of the SUV, legs shaking. Marcus came around, gun drawn, and positioned himself between her and the entrance ramp. The sedan's engine echoed through the garage, getting closer. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at it. "Backup's here. Stay behind me." The sedan appeared at the bottom of the ramp, moving slowly now, hunting. It stopped 30 feet away. Both doors open. The driver stepped out, tall, gray-haired, wearing a suit that looked government issue. The passenger was younger, harder, holding his gun with the ease of someone who'd fired it many times before. "Miss Hart," the older man called out, "we just want to talk." "Doesn't look like talking," Marcus said. "That was a warning shot. If we'd wanted to kill you, you'd be dead." "Who are you?" "My name's Carson. I work for people who are very interested in what Richard Hart left behind." Lena stepped out from behind Marcus before he could stop her. "My father's dead. Whatever he left behind is mine." Carson smiled. "That's debatable. But we're not here to argue property rights. We're here to make an offer." "Not interested." "You haven't heard the offer yet." "Don't need to. You shot at us." "A miscalculation. My colleague gets nervous." Carson gestured at the younger man, who didn't lower his gun. "Here's what we're proposing. You hand over the data your father archived, we pay you $5 million, and everyone walks away clean." $5 million, Lena repeated. "Cash. Untraceable. Enough to disappear and start over somewhere far from here." It was a fortune. More money than she'd ever imagined having. Enough to solve every problem, erase every debt, build a life without fear. But something in Carson's smile made her skin crawl. "And if I say no?" she asked. "Then things get complicated. People get hurt. You wouldn't want that." The sound of vehicles approaching echoed through the garage. Carson's expression flickered, just for a second, before smoothing back into calm. 3 black SUVs roared down the ramp and screeched to a stop, forming a barrier between Marcus and the sedan. Men piled out, all armed, all moving with coordinated precision. Adrian stepped out of the lead vehicle. "Gentlemen," he said pleasantly, "I believe you're trespassing." Carson's hand moved toward his jacket. Instantly, 6 guns swung to point at him. "I wouldn't," Adrian said. "You're outnumbered and outgunned. Walk away while you still can." "This isn't your business, Volkov. Miss Hart is under my protection. That makes it my business." Carson looked at Lena. $5 million. Think about it. You've got 48 hours. He and his colleague got back in the sedan, backed up the ramp, and disappeared. Adrian walked over to where Lena stood, visibly shaking now that the adrenaline was crashing. "You okay?" he asked. "They shot at us." "I heard. Marcus?" "I'm fine, boss." Adrian looked at Lena. "You're coming with me. No arguments." "Where?" "Somewhere safer than wherever you were planning to go." Lena wanted to protest, to insist she could handle herself, to reject the idea of needing protection. But her hands were trembling and her legs felt weak, and the reality of what had just happened was sinking in. Someone had shot at her. Someone was willing to kill her for data she didn't even know existed until an hour ago. "Okay," she whispered. Adrian guided her to his SUV. Marcus took the wheel. The other vehicles formed an escort, surrounding them as they pulled out of the garage and merged into traffic. Lena stared out the window and tried to process everything that had happened. Her father had left her a weapon, a trove of evidence that could destroy powerful people, and now those people knew she had it. "Who was that?" she asked. "Carson. Private security, the kind corporations hire when they need problems solved quietly." Adrian's voice was matter-of-fact. "He wasn't lying about the $5 million. They'd pay it, and then they'd kill you anyway to make sure the data stayed buried." "How do you know?" "Because it's what I do. Loose ends get people killed." Lena looked at him. Am I a loose end? Adrian met her gaze. Not to me. To me, you're an asset, but that only works if you're smart enough to stay alive. And how do I do that? By staying close, by trusting me, and by accepting that the life you had 48 hours ago is over. Lena turned back to the window. Manhattan sprawled outside, indifferent and massive. Somewhere in that sprawl, people were making decisions about her future, about whether she lived or died, about whether her father's work would ever see light. She'd spent the last 2 years trying to disappear, trying to build a quiet life where no one noticed her. Now she was at the center of something vast and violent, and the only person offering protection was a man who operated outside every law she'd ever trusted. What happens now? She asked quietly. Adrian's reflection appeared in the window beside hers. Now we find out what's on those drives, and then we decide how much damage we want to do. The penthouse felt different when you arrived as a prisoner instead of an employee. Lena stood in the middle of Adrian's living room while Marcus posted guards at every entrance and exit, turning the luxury apartment into a fortress. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered 40 stories below, beautiful and unreachable. You'll stay in the guest room, Adrian said, already moving toward his office. Don't leave this floor without Marcus or one of my men with you. For how long? Until we figure out what we're dealing with. I have a job, rent, a neighbor who depends on me. Adrian stopped and turned. Miss Hart, someone just tried to kill you. Your job doesn't matter. Your rent doesn't matter. What matters is staying alive long enough to understand what your father left you. Mrs. Chen needs... I'll have someone check on her. Make sure she has food, utilities paid, whatever she needs. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. Done. Anything else? Lena wanted to argue, to push back against the way he was dismantling her life and rebuilding it according to his rules. But exhaustion was catching up with her, and fear was settling into her bones like winter cold. No, she said quietly. Good. Get some rest. We start going through the drives in 2 hours. He disappeared into his office. Marcus gestured toward a hallway. This way. The guest room was bigger than her entire apartment, decorated in shades of gray and white that felt sterile and expensive. Lena sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her hands. They were still shaking. Someone had shot at her. The reality of it kept trying to sink in, but her mind kept skittering away from the thought like touching something too hot. People didn't get shot at in real life. Not normal people. Not housekeepers from the Bronx who just wanted to survive. Except she wasn't normal anymore. She was the daughter of a man who'd stolen secrets from a pharmaceutical company. She was the owner of data worth millions. She was a target. A knock on the door made her jump. It's Marcus. Boss says you need to eat something. Lena opened the door. Marcus stood there holding a tray with a sandwich, fruit, and water. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. You're going to need energy for what's coming. He set the tray on the desk and turned to leave. Marcus, Lena said. Why is he doing this? Really? Marcus paused in the doorway. You'd have to ask him. I'm asking you. He looked at her for a long moment. Adrian doesn't do anything without a reason, usually several reasons. But if I had to guess, your father did something most people wouldn't, chose principle over survival. Adrian respects that. It's rare in our world. Your world, Lena repeated. The criminal world. The real world, Marcus corrected. Where power matters more than rules and survival matters more than morality. He shrugged. Your father lived in that world too. He just chose a different path through it. And what path is Adrian choosing? The one that keeps you alive. For now, that's enough. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Lena picked at the sandwich, managed a few bites, and gave up. Her stomach was too twisted with anxiety to accept food. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to remember details about her father's last months. Had he seemed paranoid, scared? Had he ever mentioned Sterling Biotech after getting fired? Nothing useful surfaced. Just memories of him fading, getting weaker, the cancer eating him from the inside while she'd fought insurance companies and watched their savings evaporate. If someone had deliberately denied his treatment, if they'd killed him slowly through bureaucratic cruelty instead of bullets, that was murder. Cold and calculated and hidden behind paperwork. The thought made her want to break something. 2 hours later, Marcus knocked again. Boss wants you in the office. Adrian's office had been transformed into a command center. 3 large monitors sat on the desk, all displaying different data streams. A young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings sat at one of the computers, fingers flying over the keyboard. She looked up when Lena entered, assessed her with sharp green eyes, and went back to typing. "This is Riley," Adrian said. "She's going to help us access your father's files." "Help?" Riley snorted. "I'm going to do all the actual work while you stand around looking intimidating. That's what I pay you for. You pay me because I'm the best, and you know it." Adrian almost smiled. "Miss Hart, Riley is a digital forensics specialist. If there's data on those drives, she'll find it." Lena looked at the woman. She couldn't be older than 25, and tried to reconcile her appearance with the term specialist. Riley caught her expression. "I know. I look like I should be skateboarding in a parking lot, not cracking encrypted archives." "Disappointed?" "Surprised," Lena said. "Good. Surprised keeps people underestimating me, which makes my job easier." Riley gestured to a chair. "Sit. Tell me about your dad. What kind of security protocols did he use?" "I don't know. We didn't talk about his work much. Birthday, anniversary, pet names, any recurring numbers or phrases he used?" Lena thought. "He used my mother's name for a lot of passwords. Eleanor, sometimes with her birth year." "Okay, that's a start." Riley pulled up a screen showing one of the external drives. "These are military-grade hardware encrypted drives. Your dad wasn't messing around. He wanted this data protected." "Can you get in?" Adrian asked. "Can I?" Riley shot him a look. "Please. I once cracked a government server just to prove I could. This is going to take me maybe an hour, 2 if he was really paranoid." She was wrong. It took 45 minutes. The first drive unlocked with a combination of Eleanor's name and a date Lena recognized, her parents' wedding anniversary. Riley's fingers danced across the keyboard, bypassing security layers and diving into the file structure. "Holy hell," she breathed. "Your dad was thorough." "What's in there?" Lena asked. Riley pulled up a directory tree. Hundreds of folders organized by date and project code. Database backups, email archives, clinical trial, documentation, financial records. She clicked through several files. "This is everything. Every transaction, every test result, every communication." He mirrored their entire system. Adrian leaned closer to the screen. "How long was he collecting this? Based on the date stamps?" 5 years. "He started copying data the day he was hired." Lena's stomach dropped. "That's not possible. He wouldn't." "He absolutely would," Riley said. "This kind of systematic archiving? He went in planning to document everything. Either he knew something was wrong from the start, or he was smart enough to protect himself in case things went bad." Adrian pulled up a chair and sat down. "Show me the clinical trial data first." Riley navigated to a folder labeled Nexaprin_trials and opened it. Spreadsheets appeared, dense with numbers and medical terminology. "What am I looking at?" Adrian asked. "Patient data," Riley said. "Test subjects for a drug called Nexaprin. Looks like it was supposed to treat chronic pain." She scrolled through the files, frowning. "Except the results don't make sense." "How so?" "The early trial data shows significant adverse reactions, liver damage, cardiac events, 2 deaths. But the summary reports submitted to the FDA show completely different numbers. Someone scrubbed the bad results and replaced them with fabricated data." Lena felt sick. "People died?" "At least in the trials. If the drug made it to market..." Riley pulled up another set of files. "Oh no. It did make it to market. Nexaprin was approved 4 years ago. It's been prescribed to over 200,000 patients." The room went silent. Adrian's voice was very quiet. "How many deaths?" Riley typed quickly, pulling up news articles and medical reports. "Official count from the FDA investigation? 47 confirmed fatalities linked to the drug. Hundreds more with permanent organ damage. The drug was pulled from the market 18 months ago, but Sterling Biotech claimed the adverse events were statistical anomalies. They paid settlements, avoided criminal charges, and moved on." "Because the evidence disappeared," Lena said numbly. "Because the database administrator who had the evidence died," Adrian corrected. "Convenient timing." Lena's hands clenched into fists. "My father tried to stop this. That's why they fired him. That's why they killed him." "We don't know they killed him." "Yes, we do." Lena stood, pacing. "The insurance denials, the delays in treatment. They made sure he couldn't afford the care that might have saved him. And even if the cancer killed him eventually, They sped it up. They made sure he suffered. Adrian watched her carefully. What do you want to do about it? I want them destroyed. Everyone involved. I want them exposed and prosecuted and buried so deep they never see daylight again. That's a dangerous path. I don't care. You should. Sterling Biotech has lawyers, resources, political connections. Going after them means making powerful enemies. Lena turned to face him. I already have powerful enemies. Carson and whoever sent him. The people who shot at me today? What's a few more? Adrian stood and walked to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the city. If we release this data publicly, it'll cause chaos. Sterling's stock will crash. Executives will face criminal charges. Families of the victims will file lawsuits. It'll be years of legal battles. Good. But it'll also put a target on your back that never goes away. Everyone connected to Sterling will want you dead. Investors who lost money, executives facing prison, even victims' families might blame you for not coming forward sooner. My father couldn't come forward. He was dying. And now you have to decide if his death means something or if you're just going to get yourself killed for revenge. The words hit like a slap. Lena wanted to yell at him, to tell him he didn't understand, that this wasn't just about revenge. But part of her knew he was right. Anger was easy. Staying alive long enough to make a difference was harder. What would you do? She asked quietly. Adrian turned to look at her. I'd weaponize it. Use the data as leverage. Go to Sterling's competitors. Offer to sell it to them. Go to the executives. Offer to bury it for the right price. Extract maximum value and walk away rich. That's obscene. That's pragmatic. Your father's dead. Those 47 people are dead. Nothing you do will bring them back. But you could set yourself up for life with what you're sitting on. I don't want to be rich. I want justice. Justice is expensive, and it doesn't always feel as satisfying as people think. Riley cleared her throat. Oh, guys, we have a problem. They both turned. Riley's face had gone pale. What is it? Adrian asked. I just accessed your dad's email archive. She turned the monitor so they could see. He was in contact with someone at the Department of Justice, an investigator named Sarah Chen. They were planning to meet and hand over the evidence. When? Lena asked. 6 years ago, 3 days before your father was fired. Riley pulled up an email chain. He was going to be a whistleblower. Full immunity, witness protection, the whole thing. But the meeting never happened. Why not? Because the day before the scheduled meeting, Sarah Chen died in a car accident. The room went very cold. Adrian moved to the screen and read through the emails. This wasn't random. Someone knew about the meeting. Someone killed Chen and then went after your father. But they didn't kill them immediately, Lena said. They just destroyed his life, fired him, blacklisted him, made sure he couldn't work. Because they were looking for the evidence, Riley said. They knew he had copies, but they couldn't find them. So they watched him, waited for him to lead them to wherever he'd hidden the data. And he never did, Lena finished. He protected it until he died. Adrian pulled out his phone and made a call. I need a full background on Sarah Chen, DOJ investigator, died 6 years ago. Car accident. I want to know everything. Autopsy report, police investigation, who handled the case. He paused. No, I don't care what time it is. Get it done. He hung up and looked at Lena. If Chen was murdered, there will be evidence. Someone had to arrange the accident, pay off investigators, cover tracks. People always leave traces. What good does that do us? It gives us ammunition. Proof that Sterling didn't just falsify data. They committed murder to cover it up. That changes everything. How? Because murder doesn't have a statute of limitations. And because it means whoever ordered the hit is still out there, still dangerous, still willing to kill to protect themselves. Lena sank back into her chair. Every answer they found just revealed more questions, deeper crimes, wider conspiracies. There's more, Riley said quietly. Of course there is, Adrian muttered. Riley pulled up another set of files. Your dad didn't just archive Sterling's data. He archived communications between Sterling executives and a shell company called Helix Holdings. They were funneling money, millions of dollars, through offshore accounts. Money laundering, Adrian said. Gets better. Helix Holdings is connected to at least 4 other pharmaceutical companies. This wasn't just Sterling. This was an industry-wide scheme to manipulate drug trials, suppress negative results, and maximize profits regardless of safety. The scope of it was staggering. Not one company, Not one drug. An entire network of corruption that had probably killed hundreds of people. Lena felt something shift inside her. The anger was still there, burning hot, but it was focused now, sharpened into something useful. "How do we take them down?" she asked. Adrian studied her. "You're sure? Once we start this, there's no going back." "I'm sure." "Then we need a strategy. Going public immediately just makes us targets. We need leverage, insurance, and enough protection that killing us becomes more expensive than leaving us alone." "How do we do that?" "We make copies of everything, distribute them to people we trust with instructions to release the data if anything happens to us. We contact journalists, law enforcement, maybe even some of Sterling's competitors who might want to see them destroyed. We build a web of exposure where our deaths trigger automatic consequences." "A dead man's switch," Riley said. "Exactly." Adrian looked at Lena. "But it's going to take time, weeks, maybe months. You'll have to stay hidden, stay patient, and trust me to handle the details." "What about Carson and whoever sent him?" "They'll be a problem, but we can manage them. Especially once they realize that killing you just releases the data faster." Lena nodded slowly. The plan made sense. It was ruthless and calculating and exactly the kind of thing her father would have hated. But he was dead, and she was alive, and staying that way meant playing by rules he'd never had to follow. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went flat. "What?" Lena asked. "We have visitors. 3 vehicles just pulled up to the building. Private security. Probably Carson's people." Marcus appeared in the doorway, already armed. "Boss, we've got company." "I know. How many?" "At least a dozen. They're in the lobby demanding to speak with you." Adrian pulled out his own gun, checked it with practiced efficiency. "Tell them I'll be down in 5 minutes, and activate the building's lockdown protocol." "Already done," Lena stood. "What's happening?" "They're forcing a confrontation. Probably figured out we have the drives and want to negotiate before we do anything stupid with them." Adrian looked at Riley. "Copy everything to the secure cloud. All of it. If this goes bad, I want backups in at least 3 locations." "On it." He turned to Lena. "You stay here. Do not leave this office. Do not open the door for anyone except Marcus or me." "You're going down there alone?" "I'm going down there with leverage." He gestured to the monitors. "They want the data. I want assurances. We're going to reach an understanding." "And if you don't?" Adrian smiled, and it was the coldest thing Lena had ever seen. "Then people are going to learn that I didn't build my reputation by being reasonable." He left the office. Marcus followed, and the door locked behind them with a heavy click. Lena and Riley stood in silence, listening to the building's security system activate. Metal shutters descended over windows. Doors sealed with magnetic locks. Somewhere below, Adrian was walking into a confrontation that could end with everyone dead. "He does this a lot?" Lena asked. Riley didn't look up from her typing. "More than he should, less than you'd think." Adrian's good at calculating risks. If he's going down there, it means he thinks he can win. And if he's wrong, then we're both screwed. Lena moved to the window and looked down at the street. 3 black vans sat in front of the building, emergency lights flashing. Men in tactical gear stood in formation, weapons visible but not raised. This was insane. All of it. 3 days ago, her biggest worry had been whether she'd have enough money for groceries. Now she was watching a private army assemble outside a building where she was essentially being held prisoner by a man who operated outside every law she'd ever trusted. "How long have you worked for him?" Lena asked. 2 years. He pulled me out of a situation with some very bad people, gave me a job, a place to live, told me I could either waste my skills on petty crime or use them for something bigger." "And this is bigger?" Riley paused in her typing. "Adrian's not a good person. He's killed people, destroyed lives, built an empire on things that would put most people in prison. But he's honest about what he is. He doesn't pretend to be saving the world or making things better. He just survives and helps the people who are useful to him survive too." "That's supposed to be reassuring?" "No. It's supposed to be realistic." Riley went back to typing. "Your father tried to fight the system from inside, tried to use rules and procedures and evidence to make things right, and they killed him for it. Adrian understands that the system doesn't work, so he operates outside it. Sometimes that means he's the monster. Sometimes it means he's the only one who can actually get things done. Lena wanted to argue, to defend her father's choices, to insist that there had to be a better way. But she couldn't. Because Riley was right. Her father had played by the rules, and the rules had gotten him killed. Files are uploaded, Riley said. Multiple locations, encrypted with automated triggers. If Adrian doesn't check in every 24 hours, everything goes public. Just like that? Just like that. Welcome to the future your father built. Now we just have to hope Adrian doesn't get himself killed before we can use it. 20 minutes passed in tense silence. Then 30. Lena paced the office, unable to sit still, imagining worst-case scenarios. Finally, the door unlocked. Adrian walked in, looking tired but unhurt. "What happened?" Lena demanded. "We reached an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" Adrian sat down at his desk. "Carson works for a firm called Aegis Solutions. They're the cleanup crew for Sterling and about a dozen other companies. I made it very clear that killing us would trigger the immediate release of all your father's data. I also made it clear that I have resources they don't want to fight." And they just accepted that. They asked for proof. I had Riley send them a sample, just enough to show we have the real thing. They took it back to their clients for consultation. So what now? Now we wait. They have 48 hours to decide if they want to negotiate or escalate. Negotiate what? How much they're willing to pay to keep this quiet, or how much they're willing to risk to make sure it never sees daylight. Adrian leaned back in his chair. Either way, we're in a stronger position than we were 6 hours ago. Lena sat down, processing. "You're going to sell the data. I'm going to give you the option to sell it. This is your inheritance, Miss Hart. You get to decide what it's worth. It's worth 47 lives. More, if you count everyone who's been hurt by drugs that should never have been approved. Then put a price on that. Name a number that makes the last 6 years of your life worth it." Lena looked at him. "There is no number. My father died protecting this information because he believed it mattered, because he thought the truth was more important than money. And where did that belief get him? It got him killed by people who put profit over human life. Should I honor his memory by doing the same thing?" Adrian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. "You're more like him than I thought," he said quietly. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" "It's an observation and a warning. Idealism is expensive in this world. It gets people hurt. Then maybe this world needs to change. Maybe. But not today. Today you need to stay alive. Tomorrow, we figure out how to make your father's death mean something without getting yourself killed in the process." Lena stood. "I want to see the rest of the files, all of them. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Adrian gestured to Riley. "Show her everything." Riley pulled up the directory and started walking Lena through the archives. Files upon files of evidence, years of documentation, proof of crimes that had killed people and ruined lives and made fortunes for executives who'd never faced consequences. It was overwhelming, damning, absolutely devastating. And somewhere in that mountain of data was the key to destroying the people who'd killed her father. Lena just had to figure out how to use it without getting killed herself. The 48 hours felt like 48 years. Lena barely slept. She spent the time poring through her father's files with Riley, learning the architecture of corruption he'd spent 5 years documenting. Every spreadsheet told a story. Every email revealed another layer of deliberate harm disguised as corporate strategy. By the second day, she could recite the names of executives who'd signed off on falsified data, the dates when negative trial results had been buried, the exact amounts paid to silence whistleblowers who weren't as careful as her father had been. Adrian came and went, handling business she wasn't privy to, taking calls in other rooms, maintaining the empire that kept them all protected. He didn't hover, didn't question her choices, just made sure she had what she needed and left her alone to process. Marcus rotated security teams through the penthouse in 8-hour shifts. Lena learned to recognize faces, learned which guards were former military and which were just street-smart muscle, learned that all of them answered to Adrian without question. On the evening of the second day, Riley looked up from her computer with dark circles under her eyes. "I found something." Lena's back ached from sitting too long. "What?" "Your dad embedded a video file in one of the archives. hidden in layers of encryption. Took me forever to crack it. She pulled it up on the screen. I think you need to see this. The video was grainy, clearly recorded on a laptop webcam. The timestamp showed a date 6 years ago, 2 weeks before her father was fired. Richard Hart appeared on screen, looking thinner than Lena remembered, but not yet sick. His eyes were clear, focused, determined. If you're watching this, Lena, then I'm gone. And I'm sorry. His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you any of this while I was alive. I'm sorry I had to leave you with this burden, but I need you to understand what I found and why it matters. Lena's throat tightened. Riley reached over and squeezed her hand briefly before pulling back. Richard continued, I worked for Sterling Biotech for 5 years. Good salary, benefits, thought I was helping develop medicines that would save lives. Turns out I was helping them kill people for profit. They falsified clinical trial data for at least 7 different drugs. Nexaprin was just the worst of them. People died, Lena. Real people with families. And the executives knew. They knew and they didn't care because the profit margins were too good. He rubbed his face, exhausted. I tried to go through proper channels, reported it to my supervisor. He told me to keep my mouth shut or lose my job. I went to HR. They launched an internal investigation that went nowhere. So I contacted the Department of Justice. An investigator named Sarah Chen was going to help me. We had a meeting scheduled, and then she died in a car accident the day before. Richard's hands trembled slightly as he leaned closer to the camera. That's when I knew they'd kill me too if they found out what I had. So I kept copying data, kept archiving everything, and I hid it where they'd never think to look. In a storage unit under a name they wouldn't connect to me. I've been paying for it in cash for 5 years. He took a breath. I'm not a brave man, Lena. I should have gone public immediately. Should have risked everything to stop them. But I was scared. Scared they'd hurt you. Scared they'd destroy what little we had left after your mother died. So I just kept collecting evidence and hoping someone else would do the hard part. Tears were streaming down Lena's face now. She didn't wipe them away. But if you're seeing this, then I ran out of time. So now it's on you, and I know that's not fair. I know I'm asking you to risk everything for something that might not even matter. But those files contain proof of crimes that killed people. Proof that could save lives if the truth comes out. What you do with that is your choice. I won't blame you if you bury it. I won't blame you if you sell it. I won't blame you if you just walk away. Richard's eyes were wet now, too. But I hope you'll be braver than I was. I hope you'll finish what I was too afraid to start. And I hope you'll forgive me for leaving you alone with this. I love you, sweetheart. I always have. And I'm so proud of the woman you've become. The video ended. Lena sat in silence, staring at the frozen image of her father's face. Riley quietly closed the laptop and left the room, giving her space. The tears came harder now, along with anger and grief and a desperate wish that he'd trusted her with the truth while he was still alive. They could have faced it together, could have made a plan, found help, done something other than let him die protecting secrets she didn't even know existed. But he'd been protecting her, keeping her ignorant so she couldn't be implicated, couldn't be targeted, couldn't be hurt by his choices. And now she had to decide if his sacrifice meant anything. She found Adrian in his office, sitting in the dark, staring out at the city lights. He didn't turn when she entered. I saw the video, she said. Riley told me. He wanted me to expose them. That's what he wanted. Your father wanted a lot of things. Doesn't mean they were realistic. Lena moved to stand beside him at the window. You think I should sell the data? I think you should protect yourself. Everything else is optional. What if I don't want to protect myself? What if I want to burn Sterling Biotech to the ground? Adrian finally looked at her. Then you need to understand what that actually means. Not the fantasy version where you're a hero bringing down corruption. The real version where you spend years in courtrooms, where lawyers tear apart your father's reputation to discredit the evidence, where Sterling's victims sue you for not coming forward sooner, where you become famous for all the wrong reasons and spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to prepare you. There's a difference. Lena leaned against the window, feeling the cold glass against her forehead. What would you do if it was your father? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. My father was a drunk who beat my mother until she stopped fighting back. When he died, I didn't mourn. I went to the funeral, made sure he was actually in the ground, and never thought about him again. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm just telling you that not everyone has the luxury of a father worth avenging. Yours was flawed, but he tried to do something right. That's more than most people can say. So you think I should expose Sterling? I think you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. Just be smart about it. Before Lena could respond, Marcus burst through the door. We have a problem. Adrian was on his feet instantly. What kind of problem? Carson's back. But he didn't come to negotiate. Marcus pulled up a video feed on his phone. He brought friends. The screen showed the building's underground parking garage. At least 20 armed men were moving through it in tactical formation, placing charges on support columns, cutting through security barriers. They're going to bring down the building, Adrian said flatly. Looks like it. We've got maybe 10 minutes before those charges blow. Evacuate the building, now. Get everyone out. What about you? I'm getting Miss Hart somewhere safe. You handle the evacuation. Marcus hesitated. Boss, there are too many of them. Even if we get out, they'll be waiting. Then we don't go out the front. Adrian moved to his desk, pulled out a drawer, and pressed something underneath. Part of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage. Service tunnel. Built it when I bought the penthouse. Exits 3 blocks away in a building I own. Of course you did, Lena muttered. Adrian grabbed a go bag from a closet, clearly packed and ready for exactly this kind of emergency. Riley's still here? Office next door, Marcus said. Get her. Tell her to bring the backup drives. We leave in 3 minutes. Marcus disappeared. Adrian handed Lena a gun. She stared at it. I don't know how to use this. Point at what you want to stop. Pull the trigger. Try not to shoot me. He checked his own weapon with practiced efficiency. Stay close. If we get separated, the tunnel exits at a building called Mercer Towers. 3rd basement level, behind the boiler room. Wait for me there. What if you don't come? Then you take the drives and disappear. Riley will help you. Adrian, no arguments. We don't have time. Riley appeared with Marcus, clutching a backpack full of hard drives. She looked terrified but focused. This is insane. Welcome to my world. Adrian moved to the tunnel entrance. Everyone stays together. No heroics. We get out, regroup, and figure out our next move. A massive explosion shook the building. The lights flickered. Somewhere below, steel and concrete were starting to fail. Go, Adrian said. They moved into the tunnel. Adrian in front, then Lena, then Riley, with Marcus bringing up the rear. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for one person, lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in sickly yellow. The air smelled like dust and old concrete. Behind them, more explosions. The building groaned, a deep structural sound that made Lena's bones ache. Faster, Adrian called back. They picked up speed, half running through the claustrophobic passage. Lena's lungs burned. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was real. Someone was actually trying to kill them by demolishing an entire building. The tunnel branched. Adrian took the left path without hesitation, moving like he'd memorized every turn. They descended a steep staircase, emerged into what looked like an old subway tunnel, and kept moving. Gunfire echoed from somewhere behind them. Marcus cursed and returned fire, the muzzle flash lighting up the tunnel. They're in the passage, he shouted. Keep moving! Adrian grabbed Lena's arm and pulled her forward. Riley stumbled but caught herself. They ran through the old tunnel, past rusted tracks and abandoned equipment, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. Another explosion, this one closer. Part of the tunnel ceiling collapsed behind them, cutting off Marcus from the group. Marcus! Lena screamed. Adrian didn't stop. He can handle himself. We keep moving. They emerged into a maintenance corridor that looked more recent, following it up 2 flights of stairs to a heavy metal door. Adrian punched in a code and it opened into the basement of another building. Lena doubled over, gasping for breath. Riley collapsed against a wall, clutching the backpack like a lifeline. Adrian listened at the door, gun ready. Silence. No pursuit yet. Where are we? Lena managed. Mercer Towers, service level. There's a car waiting 2 floors up. What about Marcus? If he made it out, he knows where to meet us. If not, Adrian's jaw tightened. We deal with that later. They climbed 2 more levels and emerged into an underground parking garage. A black sedan sat waiting, engine running, a woman Lena didn't recognize in the driver's seat. Get in, Adrian said. They piled into the back. The driver, middle-aged, professional, calm, pulled out without a word and merged into late-night traffic. Lena looked back in the skyline. Smoke rose from where Adrian's building stood. Emergency vehicles were converging, sirens wailing. "They really blew it up," Riley said, voice hollow. "They destroyed an entire building just to kill us." "They destroyed a building to make a statement," Adrian corrected, "to show they're willing to do whatever it takes." "Did it work?" Adrian looked at Lena. "That depends on Miss Hart." Lena met his gaze. In the past 72 hours, she'd been threatened, shot at, and nearly buried alive. She'd learned her father had been murdered for doing the right thing. She'd seen proof that corporations could kill with impunity as long as they had enough money and lawyers. And she was done being scared. "Where's the nearest FBI field office?" she asked. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "You're going to the feds?" "My father tried to go to the DOJ. They killed his contact. But he didn't have what I have. Proof of murder. Proof of the cover-up. Proof they're still willing to kill to protect their secrets. We give this to the FBI with enough publicity that they can't bury it, and Sterling can't kill everyone." "They can try." "Let them. I'm tired of hiding." Lena pulled out the gun Adrian had given her and checked it like she'd seen him do. She had no idea if she was doing it right, but it felt good to hold something solid. "You said I needed to decide what my father's death meant. Well, I've decided. It means I finish what he started. It means those 47 people don't die for nothing. It means Sterling Biotech and everyone who helped them doesn't get to walk away." Riley leaned forward. "The FBI might not be clean. Sterling could have people inside. Then we give copies to multiple agencies, state police, federal prosecutors, investigative journalists. We flood the zone with so much evidence from so many directions that they can't contain it." Adrian studied her for a long moment. "You've thought this through." "I had time in that tunnel. It's still risky. The moment we go public, you become the most famous whistleblower in the country. Your face will be everywhere. You'll never have a normal life again." "I stopped having a normal life the moment Carson shot at me. At least this way my father's work means something." The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "We've got company, 2 vehicles staying with us through every turn." Adrian looked back. "Carson's people or someone else?" "Can't tell yet." "Lose them." The driver accelerated smoothly, changing lanes and taking a series of rapid turns through the city. The trailing vehicles matched every move. "They're professionals," the driver said. "I can't shake them in traffic." Adrian pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need an intercept team at the intersection of 8th and 42nd. 2 hostile vehicles, priority 1. He hung up and turned to Lena. "We're going to have company in about 90 seconds. When we stop, you run. Riley goes with you. There's a subway entrance on the northwest corner. Take it to the Brooklyn Bridge station and wait for my contact." "What about you?" "I'm going to buy you time." "No, we stay together." "Miss Hart, my name is Lena, and I said we stay together." Adrian's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or something close to respect. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking. You've been protecting me for days. Now let me stand with you." Before Adrian could argue, 2 SUVs roared up alongside them. Windows rolled down. Gun barrels appeared. "Down!" the driver screamed. Everyone dropped as bullets tore through the sedan. Glass exploded. Metal shrieked. The driver swerved hard, clipped one of the SUVs, and sent it spinning into a parked car. The second SUV rammed them from behind. The sedan fishtailed, jumped the curb, and slammed into a storefront. The airbags deployed with explosive force. Lena's ears rang. Everything was smoke and confusion and the taste of copper in her mouth. Someone was pulling her out of the wreckage. Marcus, covered in dust and blood, but alive. "Move!" he shouted. She stumbled forward. Riley was already out, clutching the backpack, her face cut but functional. Adrian climbed out of the passenger side, gun in hand, and immediately started firing at figures emerging from the second SUV. "Subway entrance," Marcus pointed across the street. "Now!" They ran. Lena's legs felt like water, but adrenaline pushed her forward. Behind them, gunfire erupted. People screamed. The city that had seemed so indifferent suddenly became a war zone. They reached the subway entrance and plunged down the stairs. Marcus threw money at the turnstile attendant and they vaulted the barriers, running for the platform. A train was pulling in. They pushed through the crowd and dove through the closing doors just as their pursuers reached the top of the stairs. The train pulled away. Through the window, Lena saw Carson himself on the platform, phone to his ear, watching them escape. Marcus slumped against a pole, breathing hard. That was too close. You're alive, Lena said. I thought, takes more than a tunnel collapse to kill me. He looked at Adrian. Building's gone, boss. Total loss. Buildings can be replaced. Adrian checked his gun, reloaded with a fresh magazine. How many did we lose? Don't know yet. Evacuation order went out, but some people might not have made it. Adrian's face went hard. Then Sterling just escalated past money and into body count. That changes the game. The train rattled through the tunnel. Passengers stared at them. Bloody, armed, clearly running from something. A few people moved to other cars, most just pretended not to notice. New York survival instinct. Riley opened the backpack and checked the drives. Still intact, all of them. Good. Adrian looked at Lena. You still want to do this? Go public with everything? More than ever. Then we're going to need help. The kind of help that doesn't come cheap and doesn't ask questions. What kind of help? Adrian pulled out his phone and scrolled through contacts. I know a journalist, investigative reporter who's been trying to bring down pharmaceutical companies for years. She's relentless, doesn't scare easy, and she has contacts in law enforcement who might actually be clean. Can we trust her? As much as we can trust anyone. He made the call. It's Adrian Volkov. I have something you'll want to see. Evidence of corporate murder, fraud, and cover-up at the highest levels. Yes, I'm serious. Tomorrow night. I'll send you the location. He hung up. She's in. Just like that? She's been waiting for something like this her whole career. Now, we just have to survive until the meeting. The train pulled into a station. Marcus checked the platform. Clear. We should change trains, make sure we're not being tracked. They exited and moved through the station, switching to a different line, doubling back, taking precautions that felt paranoid but necessary. By the time they emerged back at street level, it was nearly dawn. Adrian led them to a building in Chinatown, up 3 flights of stairs to an apartment that looked abandoned. Inside was basic furniture, a landline phone, and nothing that could be traced. Safe house, he explained. One of several. We'll stay here until the meeting. Riley immediately set up one of the laptops and started checking news feeds. It's everywhere. Building collapse in Midtown. At least 12 dead, dozens injured. They're calling it a gas leak explosion. Of course they are, Adrian muttered. Your name's in the reports. Witnesses saw you leaving just before the blast. Police want to question you. Let them want. Lena sank onto a threadbare couch and finally let herself feel everything she'd been pushing down for the last hour. The fear, the rage, the sick realization that people had died tonight because Sterling wanted to silence her. This is my fault, she whispered. Adrian looked at her sharply. No, this is Sterling's fault. They chose violence. They chose murder. You just refused to let them get away with it. People are dead because of me. People were already dead because of them. 47 in the drug trials. Sarah Chen, your father. The only difference now is that the violence is visible. That's not your fault. That's accountability finally catching up. Marcus brought water. Lena drank it without tasting anything. Riley closed the laptop. We should get some rest. We're no good to anyone if we're running on fumes. I'll take first watch, Marcus said. Adrian nodded. Wake me in 4 hours. He showed Lena to a small bedroom with a single bed and blackout curtains. She sat on the edge, still holding the gun he'd given her. You did good tonight, Adrian said from the doorway. Most people would have frozen or panicked. You kept moving. I was terrified. Being terrified and doing it anyway is the definition of bravery. I don't feel brave. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Adrian almost smiled. That's normal too. He started to leave, then paused. Your father would be proud of you, for what it's worth. Lena looked up at him. Thank you. For everything. For protecting me. For believing me. For... Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow could still go wrong in a dozen different ways. But you're still helping me. Yeah, I am. Why? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Because your father tried to do the right thing in a world that punishes people for having principles. And because I've spent my whole life being the person who profits from other people's suffering. Maybe it's time I tried something different. He closed the door softly behind him. Lena lay back on the bed, gun still in her hand, and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would hand over evidence that could destroy one of the country's largest pharmaceutical companies. Tomorrow, she would become a public figure, a target, someone whose face would be known by millions. Tomorrow her father's death would finally mean something. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but all she could see was the smoke rising from Adrian's building and the faces of people who died tonight because she'd refused to stay quiet. The cost of truth was higher than she'd imagined. She just hoped the price was worth paying. The 48 hours came and went without word from Carson or Aegis Solutions. Lena spent the time living in a strange, suspended reality where nothing felt quite solid. She slept in a guest room that cost more than 6 months of her old rent. She ate food prepared by Adrian's private chef. She worked through her father's files with Riley, cataloging evidence that grew more damning with every folder they opened. And she tried not to think about the fact that her old life had evaporated completely, replaced by something she didn't understand and couldn't control. On the third day, Marcus knocked on her door at 6 in the morning. "We've got movement," he said. "Get dressed. Something comfortable you can move in." Lena's stomach clenched. "What's happening?" "Don't know yet. Boss wants everyone ready." She threw on jeans and a sweater, tied her hair back, and followed Marcus to Adrian's office. He stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, expression unreadable. "Understood. Keep me updated." He hung up and turned to face them. "Carson's employers made their decision. They're not negotiating." "Meaning?" Lena asked. "Meaning they've decided the risk of the data going public is worth eliminating us. 3 teams are moving into position around the building. They're planning a full assault." Riley swore from her position at the computer. "How long do we have?" "Maybe an hour. They're waiting for shift change at the security desk to minimize witnesses." "So we run," Lena said. "Get out before they get in." Adrian shook his head. "They've got the building surrounded. Every exit is covered. We run, we get picked off in the street. Then what? Then we make sure dying costs them more than it costs us." Adrian pulled up a map of the building on one of the monitors. "Riley, activate the final protocol. If they breach this floor, everything goes live immediately. No delays, no second chances." Riley's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Done. Dead man's switch is armed. If our heart monitors flatline or we don't check in every 30 minutes, the data dumps to every major news outlet, law enforcement agency, and regulatory body on the list." "Good. Marcus, how many men do we have in the building?" 12, armed and positioned at key choke points. "Against 3 teams of professionals, those aren't great odds." "No, sir, they're not." Adrian grabbed his jacket and checked his gun. "Then we don't fight them head on. We make them chase us through our territory and bleed them at every turn." Lena felt her heart hammering. "This is insane. We should call the police." "And tell them what? That a pharmaceutical company is trying to kill us over stolen data? They'd take hours to respond if they respond at all. We're on our own." "So we just wait here to die?" Adrian looked at her and his expression softened just slightly. "I've survived worse odds than this, Miss Hart. So has Marcus. So has Riley. We're not planning to die today." "But you're planning for it. That's why you set up the dead man's switch." "I plan for every contingency. That's how you stay alive in this business." He moved toward the door. "Marcus, get her to the safe room. Riley, you go with them. I'll coordinate from the security center." "Like hell," Riley said. "I'm more useful here monitoring their communications and killing their tech." "Riley, don't. I'm staying. You need someone watching the digital battlefield while you handle the physical one." Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded. "Fine. But at the first sign of breach on this floor, you run. Understood?" "Sure, boss. I'll run right after I brick their entire radio network." He turned to Lena. "Marcus will keep you safe. Do exactly what he says, when he says it. No arguments." "Wait," Lena said. "There has to be another way. What if we contact them? Offer to negotiate?" "They're past negotiation. They've decided we're a liability that needs to be eliminated. Talking won't change that." "Then what about the data? We could release it now, take away their incentive, and confirm to the world that you have it, making you a target for every other entity with something to hide." "No. We stick to the plan. We survive this, then we decide what to do with what we know." An alarm blared through the building. Marcus pulled out his phone. They're coming in through the parking garage. Or 2 teams. East and west entrances. Adrian swore. Where's the 3rd team? Unknown. Find them. They wouldn't send 2 teams as the main assault. There's a backup plan we're missing. Riley pulled up the building's security feeds. Got them. 3rd team is on the roof. They're rappelling down to the executive floors. They're boxing us in, Marcus said, forcing us toward the middle floors where they can control the engagement. Adrian's mind was clearly racing, calculating angles and probabilities. Change of plans. Marcus, take Miss Hart to the service elevator. Get her to the sub-basement and out through the maintenance tunnel that connects to the adjacent building. What about you? I'll delay them long enough for you to get clear. That's suicide. That's strategy. Once Lena's safe, you double back and we extract together. Lena grabbed Adrian's arm. No, you can't stay here alone. I won't be alone. I have 12 men in Riley's technical support. You're the one who needs to get out. You're the one they really want. Because I own the data. Because you're the living proof that it exists. Without you, they can claim the drives are fabricated. The evidence is fake. With you alive and able to testify, everything becomes real and documented and impossible to dismiss. The logic was sound, but Lena hated it. She'd spent 3 days watching Adrian orchestrate protection and strategy, watching him move pieces around a board she barely understood. Now he was sacrificing himself to keep her alive, and she couldn't even argue against it because she knew he was right. This isn't fair, she said quietly. Adrian smiled without humor. Nothing about this is fair, but fair doesn't keep you breathing. Smart does. Now go with Marcus. Gunfire erupted somewhere below them. Close. Getting closer. Marcus grabbed Lena's arm. Move. Now. They ran down a hallway Lena had never seen before. Marcus moving with the efficiency of someone who'd planned this route 100 times. He unlocked a door marked Authorized Personnel Only and pulled her into a stairwell that smelled like concrete and old metal. Down, he said. Don't stop until I tell you. They descended at a run, footsteps echoing. Above them, more gunfire, shouting, the sound of doors being breached. At the sub-basement level, Marcus paused, listening. Then he opened the door and swept the corridor with his weapon before pulling Lena through. The sub-basement was a maze of pipes and electrical conduits, lit by emergency lighting that cast everything in sickly green. Marcus navigated without hesitation, turning left, then right, then through a narrow passage that Lena had to squeeze through sideways. They reached a heavy metal door. Marcus punched in a code and it swung open to reveal a tunnel stretching into darkness. Maintenance access, Marcus said. Runs under the street to the building next door. Stay close and stay quiet. They entered the tunnel. The door closed behind them with a sound like a tomb ceiling. The tunnel was narrow and cold and absolutely silent except for their breathing and footsteps. Lena followed Marcus through the darkness, one hand trailing along the wall for balance, trying not to think about what was happening 40 floors above them. Halfway through the tunnel, Marcus stopped. What? Lena whispered. Quiet. He pulled out his phone, checked something, and his jaw tightened. They found the tunnel. They're coming in from the other end. How is that possible? Someone gave them the building schematics. They knew about this exit. Marcus turned around. Back. We have to go back. But you said they're above us. Better odds fighting our way up than getting trapped down here. They ran back the way they'd come. Behind them, Lena heard voices echoing in the tunnel. Multiple people. Moving fast. They burst out of the tunnel entrance and Marcus immediately fired 3 shots down the corridor. Someone screamed. Marcus grabbed Lena and pulled her behind a support column as return fire chewed into the concrete. How many? Lena asked, heart slamming against her ribs. At least 4, maybe more. Marcus reloaded. When I move, you run for the stairs. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice. Get to Adrian. Tell him the tunnel's compromised. Marcus leaned out and fired again. Go! Lena ran. She heard Marcus laying down covering fire behind her, heard bullets ricocheting, heard someone grunt in pain. She hit the stairwell door and threw it open just as an explosion rocked the sub-basement behind her. The shockwave knocked her forward. She fell hard, ears ringing, dust and debris raining down. When she looked back, the corridor was filled with smoke and Marcus was gone. Marcus! She screamed. No answer. Lena wanted to go back, wanted to search the rubble, but she could hear footsteps coming through the smoke. Whoever had set that explosion was coming to finish the job. She forced herself up the stairs, legs shaking, vision blurred from the blast. Up and up, past the parking levels, past the lobby, climbing toward floors she recognized. Behind her, the footsteps followed, getting closer. At the 20th floor, Lena burst through a door and found herself in an office suite she'd cleaned 100 times. Cubicles stretched out in neat rows, all empty at this hour. She ran through them, looking for another stairwell, another exit, anywhere to hide. A hand grabbed her from behind. She spun, screaming, and found herself face to face with Carson. He smiled. "End of the line, Miss Hart." Lena kicked him in the knee as hard as she could. He grunted and his grip loosened enough for her to wrench free. She grabbed a desk lamp and swung it at his head. The impact made a satisfying crack and Carson stumbled backward, blood streaming from his temple. Lena ran. Carson's partner appeared from behind a cubicle wall, gun raised. Lena dove sideways as he fired, the bullet punching through a computer monitor inches from her head. She scrambled behind a desk, searching desperately for anything she could use as a weapon. Her hand closed on a letter opener. Better than nothing. The partner approached slowly, gun trained on her hiding spot. "Come out. Make this easy." Lena waited until he was close enough, then threw the letter opener at his face. He flinched, and in that split second she rushed him. They went down together, grappling on the floor. He was bigger, stronger, trained in ways she wasn't. But Lena had spent 2 years surviving on fury and desperation, and she wasn't dying in an office building for a bunch of corporate criminals. She got her hand on his gun, twisted it toward him, and pulled the trigger. The shot was deafening. The man went limp. Lena shoved him off and grabbed the gun with shaking hands. She'd never fired a weapon before today. Never killed anyone. The reality of what she'd just done tried to sink in, but she couldn't let it. Not yet. Not while Carson was still out there. She found him leaning against a cubicle wall, pressing a hand to his bleeding head. When he saw her with the gun, he actually laughed. "You're full of surprises," he said. "Where's Marcus? Your bodyguard? Probably dead." The explosion was meant to collapse that section of the sub-basement. No one survives that kind of blast. Lena's hands tightened on the gun. "You killed him." "I killed a lot of people today. It's what I do." Carson straightened, swaying slightly. "But you're the one I actually need dead. You and Volkov. Once you're gone, this all goes away. The data's already set to release. You kill us, it goes public automatically. We'll handle that. Discredit it, tie it up in legal battles, pay off the right people. By the time anyone sorts through it, it'll be old news and no one will care. People died because of what Sterling did. Families were destroyed. You can't just make that disappear." Carson shrugged. "People die every day. Companies make mistakes. The world moves on. That's how it works." "Not this time." Lena pulled the trigger. The shot hit Carson in the shoulder. He spun and went down, cursing. Lena kept the gun pointed at him, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. "Stay down," she said. Carson looked up at her, blood spreading across his shirt. "You're tougher than you look, I'll give you that. But you're still going to die here. My teams are tearing through this building. Volkov's men can't hold them off forever." "Then I guess I better make this count." Lena grabbed Carson's phone from his pocket and ran for the stairwell. She climbed toward the penthouse, every floor an agony of burning legs and gasping breath. She could hear fighting above her, gunfire, shouting, the sound of things breaking. At the 40th floor, the stairwell door was blown off its hinges. Lena stepped through carefully, gun raised. The hallway was a war zone. Bullet holes in the walls, broken glass everywhere, 2 bodies on the floor that she didn't recognize. She moved toward Adrian's office, every nerve screaming danger. The office door hung open. Inside, Riley sat at the computer, blood streaming from a cut above her eye, fingers still typing frantically. "Riley!" The young woman looked up, relief flashing across her face. "Lena, thank God, where's Marcus?" "I don't know. There was an explosion?" Lena's voice cracked. "Where's Adrian?" "Security center. He's pinned down. They've got him surrounded." "How many?" "At least 6 of their people left. We took out most of the first 2 teams, but the roof team made it through." Riley pulled up a security feed. "There. He's barricaded in, but he's running out of ammunition." Lena looked at the screen. Adrian crouched behind an overturned desk, firing methodically at targets she couldn't see. He looked calm, focused, like this was just another business transaction that happened to involve bullets. "We have to help him," Lena said. With what? We're out of reinforcements. Lena looked at the gun in her hand. With whatever we have. Riley stared at her. You're serious? He saved my life multiple times. I'm not leaving him to die.
You don't know how to fight. I killed 2 people getting here. I'll figure it out. Lena grabbed Riley's arm. Can you override the building's systems? Lock doors, cut power, anything to give him an advantage? Riley's eyes lit up. Yeah, I can do that. She turned back to the computer. Give me 30 seconds. Lena checked the gun. 4 bullets left. Not great odds, but she'd survived worse in the last 3 days.
Okay, Riley said. I'm cutting power to the security center in 3, 2, 1. The lights in the hallway flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Lena ran toward the security center, using the chaos to her advantage. She heard confused shouting from inside, someone yelling orders. She reached the door just as one of Carson's men backed out, trying to get a better angle on Adrian. She shot him in the back. The man fell, and Lena grabbed his rifle before he hit the ground. She'd never held one before, but the trigger was in the same place, and that was all she needed to know. She stepped into the security center. 5 men were positioned around the room, all focused on Adrian's barricade. In the red emergency lighting, they looked like something out of a nightmare. Lena fired. The rifle kicked harder than the pistol. Her first shot went wide, punching into a monitor, but it got their attention. All 5 turned toward her. Adrian used the distraction. He rose from behind the desk and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. 2 men went down. The remaining 3 split their fire between Lena and Adrian. Lena dove behind a filing cabinet as bullets tore through the air where she'd been standing. She heard Adrian moving, heard more gunfire, heard someone scream, then silence. Lena peered around the cabinet. 2 more bodies on the floor. 1 man left, and he was backing toward the exit with his gun trained on Adrian. Drop it, Lena said, stepping out with the rifle raised. The man turned, calculating odds. Lena could see it in his eyes. He was trying to figure out if he could shoot both of them before one of them killed him. He chose wrong. Adrian shot him twice. The man collapsed. In the sudden quiet, Lena and Adrian stared at each other across a room filled with bodies and broken equipment. You came back, Adrian said. You didn't really think I'd run, did you? I hoped you would. That was the smart play. I'm getting tired of smart plays. Lena lowered the rifle. Marcus is gone. The sub-basement explosion. I know, I saw the feed before they cut it. Adrian's voice was flat, emotionless. He saved your life. He saved both our lives. Adrian moved to the security monitors, most of them shattered, but a few still working. We need to sweep the building, make sure there aren't any more of them hiding. Adrian, not now. We clear the building first, mourn later. He was right, but Lena hated it. Hated the cold practicality, the way he could compartmentalize death like it was just another business setback. But she followed him through the penthouse, checking rooms, securing the floor. Riley was still at her computer when they returned. She'd wrapped her head wound with torn fabric from her shirt and looked like she'd aged 10 years in the last hour. Building's quiet, she reported. No movement on any of the cameras still working. I think we got them all. Police? Adrian asked. On their way. Someone in a neighboring building called in shots fired. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they arrive. Adrian holstered his gun. Then we work fast. Riley, dump the building's security footage to an encrypted drive. Everything from the last 3 hours. I want a record of who attacked us and why. Already done. Good. Scrub our personal files from the servers, anything that connects us to the data storage locations. Riley's fingers flew. Scrubbing now. Adrian turned to Lena. When the police arrive, you let me do the talking. We were attacked by unknown assailants. We defended ourselves. That's all they need to know. What about the bodies? The evidence? Self-defense is legal. We have security footage showing armed men breaking into my building and opening fire. We're the victims here. Are we? Adrian looked at her. Today we are. Tomorrow might be different. But right now we survived something we weren't supposed to survive. I'll take the win. Sirens echoed in the distance, getting closer. Riley stood from the computer. We're clean. Everything's backed up and encrypted. Even if they seize the servers, they won't find anything useful. Good work. Adrian's voice softened slightly. Get that head looked at when the paramedics arrive. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Get it looked at anyway.
The next 2 hours were a blur of police, paramedics, and questions. Detectives arrived, then federal agents, then people in suits who didn't identify which agency they represented. Adrian handled them all with the same calm efficiency, answering questions without revealing anything useful. Lena sat in the back of an ambulance while a paramedic checked her for injuries. She had cuts, bruises, a possible concussion from the explosion. Nothing life-threatening, nothing that would kill her. Unlike Marcus. Unlike Carson's men. Unlike all the people who died because of Sterling Biotech's greed. A detective approached, middle-aged, tired-looking, carrying a notepad that had seen better days. "Miss Hart? I'm Detective Morrison. I need to ask you a few questions." Lena nodded numbly. "Can you tell me what happened here today?" "We were attacked. Men with guns. They tried to kill us." "Why would someone want to kill you?" Lena looked at Adrian, who stood nearby talking to federal agents. He caught her eye and gave the smallest shake of his head. "I don't know," Lena said. "You'd have to ask them." "We can't. They're all dead." "Then I guess we'll never know." Morrison studied her. "You're not telling me everything." "I'm telling you what I know. People tried to kill me. I defended myself. That's what happened." "And the data? The information your father left you?" Lena went cold. "How do you know about that?" Morrison pulled out a card and handed it to her. "Because we've been investigating Sterling Biotech for 2 years, and we've been looking for your father's evidence the entire time." Lena looked at the card. FBI, White Collar Crime Division. "Sarah Chen," Lena said quietly. "She was one of yours." Morrison nodded. "She was my partner. She died 6 years ago trying to meet with your father. We've suspected it was murder ever since, but we could never prove it." "The data can prove it, everything, all of it." "Then I need you to turn it over. Let us handle this properly." Lena looked at Adrian again. He was watching now, clearly listening. "Give me 24 hours, Lena said. "Miss Hart, 24 hours. I need to make sure the data's secure, that copies exist, that releasing it doesn't put more people in danger. Then I'll give you everything." Morrison looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Lena's expression must have convinced him. 24 hours, he said. "After that, I'm getting a warrant." "You won't need one. I'll cooperate fully." Morrison left. The federal agents left. Eventually, even the police cleared out, leaving crime scene tape and numbered evidence markers scattered through the building. Adrian, Riley, and Lena sat in what remained of the office and watched dawn light creep across the Manhattan skyline. "Marcus had a sister in Boston," Adrian said quietly. "I'll make sure she's taken care of. Financially, whatever she needs." Riley wiped her eyes. "He was a good guy. Didn't deserve to go out like that." "No one deserves it," Adrian said. "But he died protecting someone, which is more than most people get." Lena stood and walked to the window. The city below was waking up, oblivious to the battle that had just been fought 40 floors above the street. In a few hours, people would go to work, drink coffee, complain about traffic. None of them would know that evidence capable of destroying one of the country's largest pharmaceutical companies was sitting in encrypted servers, waiting to be released. "What happens now?" she asked. Adrian joined her at the window. "Now you decide. Do you give the data to the FBI and trust them to handle it? Do you release it publicly and let the chaos unfold? Or do you use it as leverage to force Sterling and the others to change their practices? What would you do?" "I'd weaponize it, use it to extract concessions, force policy changes, maybe even get some of the executives to flip on each other in exchange for immunity. Burn the whole thing down from the inside. That's not justice." "No, but it's effective. Justice is slow and uncertain. Power is fast and permanent." Lena thought about her father, about the years he'd spent collecting evidence, protecting it, dying without seeing it used. He'd believed in the system, in rules and procedures, and the idea that truth eventually won, but the system had killed him. And it would have killed her too if Adrian hadn't intervened. "I want both," she said finally. "I want the FBI to have the data for their investigation, but I also want copies released publicly. I want everyone to see what Sterling did. I want the families of the people who died to know their deaths mattered. And I want every pharmaceutical company in the country to know that they can't hide behind lawyers and settlements anymore." Adrian smiled slightly. "That's going to make you very unpopular with very powerful people." "Good. I'd rather be unpopular than complicit." "You're sure?" Once you do this, there's no taking it back. You'll be a public figure, a whistleblower. People will dig into your life, question your motives, try to destroy your credibility. Let them try. I've survived worse. Riley looked up from her computer. I can coordinate the release. Send it to news outlets, medical journals, regulatory agencies, congressional oversight committees. Make it impossible to suppress. Do it, Lena said. When? Now. Before anyone can stop us. Riley's fingers danced across the keyboard. Releasing in 3, 2, 1. She hit enter with a dramatic flourish. Done. The world's about to get very interesting. They stood in silence, watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, journalists were opening emails. Investigators were reviewing files. Families who'd lost loved ones to Nexaprin were about to learn that their deaths had been preventable, that executives had known and profited anyway. It was going to be chaos. Lawsuits, investigations, criminal charges. Some people would go to prison, others would lose everything. And Lena would be at the center of it all. Are you scared? Adrian asked quietly. Terrified, Lena admitted. But I'm also angrier than I've ever been, and I'm tired of being scared. So I guess anger wins. Good. Anger's useful. It keeps you sharp. Is that how you've survived? By staying angry? Adrian considered the question. I survived by refusing to let the people who hurt me define what I became. They tried to break me, bury me, make me disappear. So I built something they couldn't ignore and became someone they couldn't dismiss. Revenge. Persistence. Revenge burns hot and dies fast. But persistence, that's the long game. That's how you actually win. Lena understood that. Her father had played the short game, trying to expose Sterling quickly before they could retaliate. It had gotten him killed. But she had time now, resources, protection. She could play the long game. I'm going to need help, she said. The FBI will want testimony. Lawyers will need depositions. I can't do this alone. You won't have to. Adrian pulled out his phone. I know people, good lawyers who aren't afraid of corporate giants, investigators who can dig up additional evidence, security teams who can keep you alive while this plays out. Why would you help me? You've already done more than anyone could expect. Adrian looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, his expression was completely open. No calculation, no walls. Because you remind me that not everyone becomes what this world tries to make them. You could have sold that data for millions. Could have disappeared and let someone else fight the battle. But you didn't. You chose the hard path, the one that costs you everything and might not even succeed. He paused. That's rare. Worth protecting. Lena felt something shift between them. Not romance exactly. Too much blood and violence for that. But recognition, understanding, the bond that forms between people who've survived something together. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. We've got months of legal battles ahead, maybe years. You're going to regret this decision at least 100 times. Probably, but I'll regret not doing it more, Riley interrupted. Guys, we're getting responses already. The New York Times wants an interview, so does the Washington Post. And there's a senator calling for immediate congressional hearings. That was fast, Adrian said. That's what happens when you drop a nuclear bomb of evidence on the world's lap. Everyone wants a piece. Lena took a deep breath. Okay, set up the interviews, all of them. I want to tell this story properly. Over the next weeks, Lena did exactly that. She sat for interview after interview, walked federal investigators through her father's evidence, testified before a grand jury investigating Sterling Biotech. She became a public face for pharmaceutical reform, whether she wanted to be or not. Sterling's stock crashed. 3 executives were arrested. Others fled the country. The company filed for bankruptcy within 2 months. But it wasn't just Sterling. The data her father had collected implicated 7 other pharmaceutical companies in similar schemes. The scandal spread like wildfire. Congressional hearings were scheduled. New regulations were proposed. Families of victims filed a class action lawsuit that promised to be the largest in medical history. Through it all, Adrian stayed close. Not hovering, not controlling, just present. His security kept her safe from the death threats that flooded in. His lawyers kept her protected from the legal countermeasures Sterling's allies tried to deploy. His resources kept her fed, housed, and functional when the pressure threatened to break her. And slowly, something else developed between them.
Not the captor and prisoner dynamic of those first days. Something more equal, more honest.
"You could work for me," Adrian said one night, 3 months after the data release. They sat in his office watching news coverage of another Sterling executive being led away in handcuffs. "Doing what?" Lena asked. "Whatever you want. You've got a gift for finding patterns, uncovering hidden problems. I could use that. Legitimately, even. I'm trying to clean up parts of my operation. Having someone who actually cares about right and wrong would be useful. You want to hire me as your conscience?"
I want to hire you as an analyst who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm making stupid decisions, which, despite my best efforts, happens occasionally. Lena smiled. I'll think about it. Take your time. The offer stands.
6 months after the data release, Lena stood on the steps of the federal courthouse and watched as the last major Sterling executive was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Somewhere behind the crowd, Adrian waited in an unmarked car, ready to extract her when this circus got too overwhelming. A woman approached, elderly, hunched with grief, carrying a photograph of a young man. "My son," she said, holding up the picture. "He died from Nexaprin 2 years ago. The doctors said it was his heart, that it was just bad luck. But it wasn't, was it?" Lena looked at the photograph. A smiling young man, maybe 30, full of life. "No," she said quietly. "It wasn't luck. I'm sorry." The woman touched Lena's hand. "Thank you for telling the truth, for making them pay. My son didn't die for nothing now." She walked away and Lena felt tears she'd been holding back for months finally break free. All those people, all those families. Her father had tried to save them and died in the process. But the evidence he'd protected had finally done what he'd hoped. It had exposed the truth and forced consequences. It didn't bring anyone back, didn't erase the pain, but it meant something. That night back at the penthouse, Lena found Adrian on the balcony overlooking the city. "I'm taking the job," she said. He turned. "Yeah? Yeah, but I have conditions." "Of course you do. I want to focus on legitimate operations, supply chain analysis, vendor compliance, financial auditing. I'll help you find problems and fix them, but I won't help you hide crimes." "Fair enough. And I want to say in how you handle things when we find corruption. No more just paying people off or making them disappear. Some situations require creativity and patience instead of violence. I'll show you alternatives. You can decide if they work better." Adrian smiled. "You're going to be a pain in my ass, aren't you?" "Absolutely. Is that a problem?" "Not even a little bit." He held out his hand. "Welcome to the team, Miss Hart." She shook it. "It's Lena. If we're going to work together, you should probably use my first name." "Lena, then." Adrian's expression softened. "For what it's worth, your father would be proud of what you did." "I hope so. He deserved better than what he got." "So did you. But you're building something better. That counts." They stood on the balcony and watched the city lights. Below them, millions of people lived their lives, most of them never knowing how close they'd come to being casualties of corporate greed. Because one man had collected evidence, and his daughter had refused to let his death be meaningless. Lena thought about the journey from that night in Adrian's kitchen, stealing food, desperate and drowning, to this moment. Standing in a penthouse, employed, protected, part of something that might actually make a difference. It hadn't been smooth. It hadn't been safe. People had died. She'd killed. She'd survived things that still woke her up at night. But she'd also learned something her father maybe never understood. Sometimes the only way to fight monsters was to find bigger monsters willing to fight on your side. Adrian Volkov was dangerous, ruthless, and operated outside every moral boundary she'd been taught to respect. But he'd also saved her life, protected her when no one else would, and given her the resources to finish what her father had started. The world wasn't as simple as good and evil. It was complicated and messy and full of people making impossible choices with incomplete information. Her father had tried to be purely good, and it had killed him. Adrian had embraced being ruthless, and it had kept him alive. Maybe the answer was somewhere in between. Maybe you could be both strong and principled. Maybe you could fight dirty and still fight for the right things. Lena didn't have all the answers, but she had time to figure it out. And for the first time in years, she had something she'd forgotten was possible. Hope that tomorrow might actually be better than today. "Hey," Adrian said quietly. You okay? Lena smiled. Yeah, I actually think I am. And standing there on a balcony 40 floors above Manhattan, watching the city pulse with life, Lena Hart allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found solid ground. The fight wasn't over. It probably never would be. But she wasn't fighting alone anymore. And that made all the difference.